Couple minutes late, but welcome to Tech Talk Taco Tuesday number 7, live from Ramiro's in Pahrump, Nevada. Had a really good week of riding. Makes me excited. Had a bad day of working up on top of a roof today, and means I didn't go riding, so I'm not excited about that. But I'm stoked to be here. We're going to talk about motorcycles, dirt bikes specifically, and dirt bike-related products. Got a few things to talk about. Mentioned we were going to talk about electric bikes. We'll talk a little bit about our Honda CRF450X, the 2019 bike. I've been wearing some new Klim tactical gear, which is like a protective undergarment. Probably talk about that. Haven't really tested it that much yet because luckily I haven't fallen over or used it, but I did do a couple things with it. And found some interesting thing on the internets, and of course I will answer as many questions of yours that you post up on the live stream as I can. We try to keep this thing at about an hour long and then put it up on the YouTubes later, so in case our stream drops here and you miss something, you can go watch it over there, and maybe even have a guest or something. That's what this microphone over here is for. So we'll see how this goes. I am going to look at the questions real quick, see where we're at. I got to figure out whether this thing goes up or down like that. I can't tell, but it looks like it goes up, so we should be good. So on the big news front this week on the dirt bikes, Honda introduced a CRF, and actually it's a CRE, not a CRF. We called it a CRF because Honda had this big initiative where they were going to make the entire off-road dirt bike line CRFs, which stands for four-stroke. And now there's a CR, and if you look really careful at it, it says CR, and there's a big E, and then it says prototype. So this thing was built by HRC in conjunction with Mugen over in Honda. It was released at the Tokyo Motor Show, which used to be a really big event where there was all kinds of cool stuff. This is probably one of the bigger things that they introduced, and it is, well, it's another electric bike. And so I have ridden the electric bike since they very first started, and probably up until just recently, and just recently I mean the Alta and then a little bit of the KTM. I didn't think they were ready for prime time, especially for off-road. And I'm speaking specifically off-road because when you start talking about like on-road and urban commuter stuff, there's a big need for those, and some of those bikes are really good, and they became, the Zeros specifically, got really good at this sort of urban commuter mobility bike. You see a lot of them in cities. You see people... actually see some sheriff's departments and police departments have started using them. So I have kind of my own personal take on where I think the electric bike is at, and I've always said for a long time that the best electric bike was the O-Set, and those are these little children's bikes, and they're little trials bikes, and they're great because you just plug them in and your kid rides them around. The battery lasts longer than your kid's attention span, and they learn how to ride bikes, and there's no oil or grease, or you throw it in the trunk and you can ride it around in a park, and usually people say, oh, look at that little kid, he's having fun, and then it's kind of cute. So didn't really have the bad side of things that go around with, like, let's say if a kid was riding a PW50 around the same park, because it's a gas motor and it made a little bit of noise, you would have people saying, maybe not so cute, hey, you're not allowed to do that. And this kind of takes me on to the next thing, like, are electric bikes going to replace gas-powered bikes? Not so quick, especially when we start talking about them in an off-road environment. What's cool about this Honda is it shows that they are interested in it, and they're looking forward. And from my take on it is that the battery technology is going to advance so quickly that jumping into it now is only probably in a development stage. You want to learn about it. You want to have some experience with the technology. You want to see how your customer base responds to this technology. What they did was, it was about a year ago, maybe a little bit more. Mugen produced this. It was kind of weird. It was really organic looking electric bike, and I think it was camouflaged, and it looked like a leopard or something like that. I don't remember. There's pictures all over the internet of this thing. That was the first kind of thing. It wasn't Honda specifically doing it, but it was Mugen doing it, and they have a long history with Honda, and you can see that they helped develop one of the Honda Superbikes that's raced at the Isle of Man TT in the electric class. And so there's these kind of niche, racing applications, and I'm sure that they're trying different things. They don't really release a whole lot of information about what's inside of the motor and how it works. But from what you can see in the pictures, it does not have a clutch lever, so it's a single speed, typical wire to rear wheel. They have some sort of a controller in there that controls how much power is getting put to the rear wheel. And if you know anything about electric motors, they make all of their torque at 0 RPMs. So when I rode some of the very first electric bikes, the interesting thing was when you hit it, they went bang, and then the more you twisted the throttle, the more they got lackadaisical, for lack of a better term. So when you're doing something like coming up to the lip of a jump and you use that last little burst to kind of carry the bike, it was like your bike bogged. It was almost like it was seizing. That was the only way I would be able to describe the feeling. It's like you're 125, you're going off the jump, and it starts to seize, and it just loses all of its torque as you rev it up. Well, those are the early controllers, and then they were developed a lot by people in the mountain bike world or bicycle world that just liked anytime you could get power, it was good. So there was some development and advancements in the controllers that got better, so they actually had a normal throttle feel. But the original bikes were just, for a regular dirt bike guy, were horrible. So kind of roll in, then there was some advancement in technology where they got the controllers to mimic more what a regular throttle does, largely because some of those developers and engineers went and rode a motorcycle and saw how it worked. And then there was, I can't remember the name of the brand right now, but they actually put a transmission in theirs. So it had a clutch and a transmission, but it still ran through an electric motor to try to get some of that feel and be able to use the torque, because the faster you went, the less torque, because the motor is spinning essentially, except with the exception of the gearing from the countershaft sprocket to the big sprocket. The motor is still spinning pretty fast, and that caused kind of like a lack of snap or torque feel. So roll forward to where we're at now, and Alta kind of came along. And I remember when I very first saw the Alta, I just went pipe dream, because it really, hey Mitch, could you not, you significantly diminished our internet speeds. Yeah, really, it's coming in a tube of, I don't know, right out of that door. Yeah, you blocked it. It started drive. So anyhow, back to the Alta. I saw it and I said, that's kind of crazy. And they were comparing it straight away. They compared it with a 250cc motocross bike, and I'm like, that's a big ask. And I hadn't ridden a bike that was electric bike that was able to put out that kind of power. Zero had some stuff that did pretty good, but it still wasn't 250F worthy. And then I finally got a chance to ride an Alta, and I was really, really impressed with the power output and the fact that they got what a normal guy would kind of expect as a characteristic dirt bike style power or pull out of it. And but they were dealing with some suspension issues and what I always thought was kind of a critical handling issue with the way that the chassis was designed and how the engine was driving, connecting to the swing arm and where the foot pegs were. It was something that, knowing from some development projects I've been involved with before, that type of chassis doesn't really work on something that's that heavy. And the bike was a little bit heavy because the battery was heavy, But when you rode it, it did not feel that heavy because a lot of that weight was not spinning like it is in a normal, like a 450. It weighed, I'm pretty sure it weighed kind of similar to what a 450 weighed, but when you rode it, it felt a lot lighter. And I was really impressed with that bike, and I thought, okay, there's a lot of development here, but how much money have they milked out of wherever their thing? Because they're going to have to sell a lot of these to make it profitable. And of course, the battery technology is changing, and that battery wasn't exactly interchangeable. So, we saw where that's gone. I believe Harley Davidson owns that intellectual property right now, and I don't think you're going to see Altas being produced anymore. So, enter the Honda bike. There's some interesting things in that it's water cooled, so they've obviously probably putting out some power, and they need to run water through that engine or the engine controller or something to keep it cooled down, maybe through the battery as well. And everything revolves at this point around batteries. And I've heard a few people say that you need. We went down, didn't we? Yeah, I think we dropped. Okay, it resumed. I just got a note. So we were talking about the Honda being liquid cooled, which means they're putting out a significant amount of power. That's, you have to disperse the heat when you're doing that kind of stuff. And their super bike that they're running, Isle of Man, has no shortage of power. So that's not the problem. It's like, how do you control it? But it really comes down to battery power, and you're storing this energy inside of a battery, and how quickly can you charge it, how quickly is going to discharge. And I hear all different kinds of arguments about it. Oh, this is green. And I had an interesting kind of point of view put together by my good friend Chris Real, who runs DPS Technical, and he is always doing sound tests and a lot of really insightful engineering and sound and emissions compliancy tests with lots of different vehicles. And he said, he was kind of like, well, look at it this way. What does it take to charge that battery up? And we're talking about off-road specific vehicles. And generally, if you're off-road, you're going to go riding someplace where you're not going to be able to plug it into this charging station that they have out in Baker, California for your Tesla. Or in these long distance, how far will it go? But let's just say we're going to ride that bike for 40 miles. That's how far we got on our Alta, I believe, before it was literally, it was getting pretty close to being dead. We had a little bit of kind of safety. I think we got 45 on it. You'd have to look on the test, on dirt bike test, to see exactly the numbers. I don't remember. But when you start talking about the range, okay, if you were to go that far on your regular dirt bike, you'd maybe burn a gallon or a gallon and a half of fuel. And even in a racing application, you're getting 20 miles a gallon. So that's 2 gallons of fuel to go your 40 miles in a worst case scenario. But if you were going to charge that back up, let's say we're going to charge that to a full charge, in the Alta's case, it kind of was going to take a big generator, which is like an 1800 cc generator, and it was going to have to run for 2.5 hours. And so you start looking at the fuel consumption of that, that's like a gallon an hour. Net, you're burning more fossil fuel to charge up your battery to go less distance. So that's kind of that's an interesting thing. It's like, how green is this? And that's not even getting into the discussion of how these batteries are produced and what's the life of the battery and a lot of other things that we look at. But here's the positives of this. They're quiet. And we were just having a discussion at dinner about, that they're going to have to make sound-making devices on motorcycles or cars because people can't hear them coming. But these are quiet, and I think that's the best thing, because now we have these off-road areas where one of the biggest things that you need to be aware of is your sound, how much noise you're making, how close can you get to urban environments without disturbing. It's the biggest problem with motocross tracks. They get shut down because they're too loud. So this could be a kind of a solution to that. And most people don't ride their bikes, they're not going to go out and do a 40-minute moto. So you can probably get 2 20-minute motos with current battery technology and be pretty happy with your performance. So there's on that side, but no matter what, if you're out on the trail and you're seeing this happen with the power assist mountain bike community, if you're out riding on trails, and you're going to get stink eye if you're on one of those really bitchin' power assist mountain bikes that work great, and it's not like they're tearing the trail up. It's just like, oh, you're not really riding, you're not using human power, you have an engine. And you have an engine. So I have nothing against the e-assist mountain bikes. I think it's great. It's getting more people out there, people that can't, it makes people more compatible. Maybe you're really fit, and someone like me who's not very fit, I can go riding with you on an e-bike. Or maybe, even though I'm not very fit, my wife can go riding with me on an e-bike, and I ride my regular bike. And that's a cool kind of thing. So I don't know exactly where this is going, but you have to start thinking about the advantages. Okay, they're quiet. They do have a more green perception, but in reality, maybe they're not. And then, how is this going to introduce more people? Where's this technology going? You've seen Honda is putting it into a really good chassis. They're putting it in a very, top of the line chassis. They are a motorcycle company. They know how to make a good chassis. KTM chose to put theirs inside of a free ride chassis, which was a little bit different. So they were saying, okay, maybe this is a different platform. It's not really for competition use. So we'll see. It's still new. I really think it's new. I think it's awesome. Honda's got into it. It kind of does legitimize the fact that electric vehicles are coming, and I'm sure they are. It's just it's an evolving technology, and you wouldn't want to be left behind. But I think like a company like Alta, for instance, really kind of pioneered new ground and showed what you could do, and it gets kind of tricky being kind of the first to the game. So that's my take on the electric thing. I will hopefully poke around and see what you guys have said, although I think my stream's down again, isn't it? Let's see. Yeah, no, I got a couple things. Let's see. Hydrogen powered. Yeah, there's Bob for you, right? Okay. We have to method. got Crazy Nate in the house here tonight, and anybody? Yeah. So if you've been around the motorcycle industry for a long time, and I've been around for a little bit of a long time, you would know who Crazy Nate was, because the infamous super hunky Rick Simon used to write about him, because Crazy Nate was his #1 test rider back in Dirt Bike magazine days. He's the guy who took a stock. Hey Nate, what'd you win the greenhorn on? What bike? YZ250? Yeah, he can't remember exactly what it was, but he took one of their magazine bikes. He's like, it's a dirt bike test bike. I don't know. He took a magazine test bike. He didn't know how to time keep, and he managed to finish the first day with like a broken frame and some other stuff. And you got to hear these stories. They're absolutely classic. But he was going to quit because he didn't really like riding. You didn't like riding enduros.
Well, I did, because the ones that I rode were so fast that you didn't have to keep.
Yeah, he said he liked riding them because the enduros were so fast you didn't have to keep time. So anyways, he finished the first day with a broken frame, said he didn't like it, quit. They welded his frame back together, and he went on to win because he was one of the few guys that finished and was able to keep time. God forbid he had to time keep, right? Timekeeping was for... Yeah. Yeah, it was for intellectuals, he said. And he usually uses a different word. So, anyways, I'm going to kind of run down some of the questions. Is Andrew Short training with me again this year? I hope so. I think he is. He's in Dubai right now. They're racing into training shape. Let's see, what kind of range are you talking about for electric Honda dirt bike? I have no idea because I haven't ridden one, and I won't know until I do, but they're not really giving that stuff. And Dave Whitedale says, I saw the MIPS article in Cycle World. How are you going to create a rig to test that? I am not going to. I'm going to find someone that is a good scientist that understands off-road concussions and how off-road crashes happen, and there's some really good guys out there, and I would like to bring that person or their lab a whole bunch of helmets to test so we can see how this stuff works. Now, like I talked about in the last thing, if you tell me how you're going to crash, I can probably tell you based on the test results what kind of helmet you should use. But you can never simulate exactly what happens. But these technologies, the rotational impacts and things, it's all getting better and better, and it's great that we're looking at it. And you know, I think the good thing about MIPS is it's simple. They'll license it out. You can install it on almost any helmet. And it doesn't affect the overall effectiveness of the helmet in the normal tests. So it's just a bonus at this point. But to actually properly test it, it'll take a lot of information, and you know, the feed is constantly freezing. I know, because I think everybody in here is using the internet. So we keep saying we're gonna fix it, and I don't. But if I don't fix it, shoot, my computer doesn't even work anymore. Okay, that's it. Internets are fired here. Do I have to run a speed test to see it? I'm going to check right here on my other phone. Let's see here. Let's see. I have good signal with my thing, so that's good. And we're going to check. I'm going to wreck the internets by doing a speed test, because we'll figure out how to get to the bottom. Is it back at all? Yeah. Yeah, I'm showing good download speed, so that's okay. Why don't we open that door again and see if that helps? Maybe we should start asking a bunch of silly questions. Okay, I'm going to ignore you, Bob. How about that? I can push a button. Let's see. Unrealistic. I'm trying to watch, but it keeps freezing. Yeah, I would be out too if it freezes. But here's what you do. If this freezes, is you go on to Dirt Bike Test, and tomorrow we will put up the full live feed from the YouTubes, and then you can do that. Obviously, it's working at some point or another, because people are seeing and hearing things. I think it's because everybody in here started using their phones all of a sudden, and then they killed off the internets. So I'm going to move on to our Honda 450X, which we basically put probably 1,800 miles on it. Chain and sprockets wore out, so we have a new Sunstar. It's called a Works Z steel sprocket. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these, but it's really interesting. It's a pressed, I think it's pressed stainless sprocket, and it's like has little thin teeth that are alternated. So they're kind of like, I'm gonna go up here so this thing, it's like they're alternated. So it's one side gets on one, it doesn't fit all the way in between the chain. It does like half chain. It goes on one side, the middle, the other side, and vice versa. Kind of swings around. So I don't know if you've ever ridden in sand and you've gone a deep sand and your chain tightens up because it packs sand. It's on there, it goes clunk, 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 clunk. This sprocket doesn't do that because it's only using a small portion. It's not wedging a bunch of sand inside of there. And I've used one a long time ago on a long-term KTM 400 I had, and I got an incredible amount of mileage on it. And I thought it wouldn't last that long. And I thought, okay, it wouldn't last that long. And then I thought maybe it would wear the chain out as well prematurely. And it didn't do that either. So we put one of those on with one of the Sunstar chains. We also went from a 51 to a 50 rear sprocket, and then the way we cut the chain was we moved the axle closer to the up in the swing arm, closer to the engine, which made the wheelbase just a little bit shorter. And this is something that we also saw that Johnny Campbell did with their race bike, and it really does help the handling. If that bike has just a little bit shorter of a wheelbase, it makes it feel a lot more lively, and it doesn't lose any stability. So those are some of the things we've done with that bike. And we tried a bunch of TM Design Works stuff, and I think the chain guide and the countershaft sprocket cover fit, as well as the caliper cover and the rear disc rotor protector. So the skid plate didn't fit because there's a coolant catch tank where they attach to, so they're going to have to do some modifications there. And the buffer pad is completely different on the X model because the swing arm and the attachment points are different. So that's where we're at with that bike. And now we're over 2,000 miles on it. We've done a few oil changes. I'm going to put up a test on that bike. And the one question I did see a couple times was, Jimmy, would you have this or a KTM 450? And it's a loaded question because I don't know what KTM 450 you were referring to when you asked that question. Because is it EXC, or which there's not a lot of? There's the 6-day ones, or are you talking about like XCF? And I would compare XCF more to the Honda RX, not the straight X. I would compare the EXC more to where the CRF450 is. So the Honda is really good at like Baja style stuff and going fast, like, you know, 2 tracks and even fast desert single track and stuff. It's really, really good at that. And the more we ride it, the more we realize that, and the more that I ride it on that kind of stuff, the more I appreciate what it's doing. And I think, you know, because KTMs are pretty good, but the more you're going on slower and more single tracky kind of stuff, the KTM becomes better. The faster you're going, the more you're kind of moving. Like I always said right from the get-go, that the Honda is really good if you're just going to leave it completely box stock and just ride it like that. But if you start looking at modifying it, there's right now there's less stuff to do, but it's really simple stuff to do. We'll talk about that in the update. And then you can kind of get pretty decent power, and you can get uncorked. You're turning into a really good competition bike, and even for like stuff like Hare and Hounds, I think it's going to be a lot better than the Honda RX. So there's ways to do that, but it's kind of like if you're 2nd through 6th gear, Honda. If you're 1st through 4th gear, KTM. And then if you're, you know, and that's EXC versus X. Once you go to XC, then you're more in RX territory, and that's we did a comparison with those bikes, I believe, last year. So that'll give you a little bit more idea on those different bikes. So that's on that one. And another thing, interestingly enough, that came up, and I'm going to go ahead and try to see if this thing, I don't know if I can get some questions back up here, because I see it's back up on the thing here. Let's try to reload this and see how we do. And get some more questions. Okay. Wow. There are questions. I see them now. Incredible. Let's see. Scrolling down. Yeah, there we go. I caught back up. I'm back. Maybe you're back. Let's see. Last year, so Jesse asked, last year my 2013 KTM EXC had its cam chain jump off somewhere. Basically, my bike ran fine the previous ride with no signs of any issues. Next ride, I offloaded and it was completely locked up. And what if the Kickstarter? And let's see, I'm just summarizing here. So basically, his cam chain tensioner on a KTM 350, that one is activated via oil pressure only, somehow allowed the cam chain to jump. Yes, I've heard of this happening before. Is it a common issue? I don't think it's that common, although I have a KTM 350, and I had one that has probably 350, 400 hours on it, and it did something similar, although when we heard that cam chain get loose, which was at low RPM, it was fine, and all of a sudden, just at low RPM, it was clanking. We stopped riding the bike, and I replaced the cam chain tensioner. It's never been a problem since then. So I know that Dirt Tricks does make a one that's manually adjustable, and there's some that have some ratcheting mechanisms in there. Those can be good and bad for a number of different reasons. If it's just manually adjustable, you have to know how to manually adjust it and do it properly. That takes probably a lot more technique than, I would say, somebody that you're going to have more. Most people would have more problems with something like that than not have that problem. So, but if you hear it getting loud and clanky, stop. stop. Don't ride it anymore. Hopefully that answers that question. Let's see. I'll go down here. So the other thing, another interesting question I was asked this week was someone had a completely stock KTM, and I don't know exactly which one it was, but it was in one of the emissions compliance bikes. I think it was an EXC, and they were having problems with it not running very well. All of a sudden, it was just, especially at low RPMs, it was having a hard time starting, and it was really kind of crappy at low RPMs. And those bikes, so basically, they have an evaporative emission system on there. So where the vent hose comes out of the gas tank, it's not really a vent hose. It gets sucked back into the charcoal container, and via your intake system, the sucking pressure of the intake system, they're drawing some of those. That's where they're creating the vacuum, and they're drawing some of those fumes back in and burning them, as opposed to letting them escape out in the atmosphere. So there's all kinds of different things like emission block-off kits and stuff you can do. And it depends on where you're doing it. Of course, you're trying to make your bike into, you've taken an EXC and you say, I want to make this into a competition bike, so you can eliminate that kind of stuff. What you have to remember is, if your gas tank is full and there's gas splashing up, the stuff that, would ordinarily just splash up and fall down, well, now all of a sudden it's like someone's sucking on a straw, and that straw is getting sucked into your charcoal container. And if the gas tank is full, totally full especially, it's sucking a lot of gas in there, and then all of a sudden your mixture is ridiculously rich, and the bike is not going to want to start, because it's like on an old carbureted bike, when you tip it over and then gas would spill out and leak not only onto the ground but also into the intake system, into it would spill out into the carburetor, into the airbox track, and you have to hold the bike wide open to clean it out and get it started. Same thing here. But if you eliminate the bike being able to suck through that system, so in other words, if the little brass fitting that were in your intake were somehow got brazed up and it didn't suck anymore, that whole system kind of sits there. It doesn't cause any faults with the bike, and then it doesn't suck the gas in there. And I would also recommend routing that vent tube to atmosphere, kind of like a dirt bike, and don't tip over, and then it won't spill and you won't have to worry about it anymore. So that is my answer for that, before everybody kind of jumps on the valves are tight, which, of course, if your bike is hard starting for no particular reason and it just starts to get that way, your valves may be tight, but generally valves get tight because of a couple reasons. Over revving is a really good way to make your valves tight. A lot of over revving, hitting the rev limiter. Most riders don't do that. Actually, the best way to over rev your bike is to downshift in the air while you're landing off a jump. Yep, that works. No rev limiter is going to stop that, my friend. So that's probably the best way to do your valves. But generally, if you suck dirt, that will also wear the coating off your valves, or this coating off the seat, and then your valves will get tight that way. So that's a great way to get your valves tight. Rarely do valves just under normal use get tight. Of course, there were some bikes that had a little bit of issues with that in the past, but not so common. And we're back on this. How have the valves held up on the X during those 1,800 miles? I'm pretty sure they're perfect. I checked them at probably 400 miles-ish and realized what a pain in the ass it was to get the feeler gauge underneath the intake valves, and they were perfect, and I haven't checked them since. I don't anticipate checking them anytime soon. If the bike got hard to start, I would check them right away. So that's where I'm at on that valve. I think that you're going to find that bike is very well built and overbuilt, and under normal use and stuff, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. So Victor is asking, of all the bikes I have tested, which one would you consider to be the most bulletproof bike? Old, new, the year doesn't matter. That's another loaded question from the from the field. Oh, most bulletproof bike. I had an XR80 that I ported the head on, And let me tell you how I ported the head. I took the intake boot off, and I took a Dremel motor in there and a drill and just went like this. No, I didn't take the head off. I just, because I read that porting was good. I didn't even know the difference between two-stroke or four-stroke. I just did it when my dad was away, and he didn't know I took tool. I ported the head on that thing, and it sucked and ate all the aluminum, and the bike ran great for a long, long time. So that was a pretty durable bike. But if we go into recent history, you know, I always say that you know, I used to race desert race YZ125s, and I had like a fit of seizures on one of those one year. And was it me or was it the bike, or, you know, who knows? But those were really durable in the grand scheme of things. I raced KTMs in the early 90s. Those things were indestructible for the most part. At least mine were. But you start finding people doing all these weird different things, and when you start getting to the root of the problem, it's generally the guy spinning the wrenches on it that determines the majority of the durability on a vehicle. I don't change my oil all that often. I do it more by feel than by what a manufacturer says. I've noticed I can feel, especially on you know, bikes that are hard on oil, let's say, you know, air-cooled Hondas, I could feel right away when it was getting harder to shift, and that was usually right about the time that I needed to change the oil. And you could, sometimes you can even feel it. I can put it on the dipstick and rub it, a little bit of oil on my fingers. You can kind of feel, that stuff's not as slippery-ish as it was. And then when we move on to the modern times, I mean, there's, you know, all of my KTM two-strokes have been ridiculously reliable, and I've taken something back. So back in '92, I think, when I started riding 250s, those KTM power valves used to like to break, and those weren't very durable, and that was a known issue on the 250-300. But I was talking about 125s. Like my rental fleet for my school is a lot of 2000 to 2007 KTM RFS motors. That one is nearly indestructible too, unless you had a 525 and then you had somebody modify it and then you did this or that to it. And especially by building up heat in the clutch, the 525 can get a little bit unreliable. But if you kind of watch for them, you know that the intake valves wear out after about 150 hours. So you have to replace intake valves on those bikes. It's just like part of the maintenance schedule. I like the Husaberg 570. That's one of my favorite bikes. Okay, we're not going to record your PIN number, I promise you. I'll keep the camera on the small screen. Actually, we can't see it, so no worries. We're right next to the ATM machine here. It's all cash deals here at Dirt Bike Test. If you want to buy us, all you do is come over to the ATM machine, pump some money out, and we'll take care of you. Husaberg 570, yeah, most durable bike ever known to man. Except you just don't want to have to work on it because it's difficult. And then, I don't know. I've got probably collectively 1,500 hours on KTM 500s, and I haven't done anything but replace clutch dampers, and that's it. Change the oil. So, let's see. He should have turned off his laptop. Yeah. I'm not going to say XR650. I could. I sucked a lot of sand through my XR650 and it still runs. And I rebuilt that one at like, I don't know how long. A lot of hours on that one too. But generally the Honda stuff is really good. The KTM stuff is excellent. Yamaha stuff is excellent. And then my thing with Suzuki's is some of those bikes are really, really good and durable. And then just for no reason, something will break, and it's kind of mystery. And it's not something that's repeatable. It's just like all of a sudden your Kickstarter shaft snapped, or all of a sudden, you know, third gear is missing. So, and then Kawasaki's kind of the same sort of thing. Like sometimes the Kawasaki's, like the metal on just like the nuts and bolts where they thread in the frame. Sometimes the plastic wasn't as good as some of the stuff I'd noticed. So, but they're working on it, and all the time they seem like they're making changes. And now the biggest thing is a lot of stuff is being produced in factories that are not necessarily where you think the factory is, and we'll start seeing how that plays out, where that ends up with a lot of the bikes and stuff these days. I have noticed a little bit of some stuff on Hondas in the past, probably 5 or 6 years, where there's little things that don't seem like they're as tough and durable as they used to. Like, it's just something simple as like the frame oxidizes easier than the old ones, and maybe, who knows. But it's not like they're breaking or anything like that. So, is there a really good, is there the most durable bike? It kind of depends on, like I said, probably the guy who's using it and how much you're maintaining it and how much of an ear you have for that kind of stuff. I know people that can break anything. And speaking of break anything, here's something I saw that was on the internets. I found a thing called Torture Test Magazine. And it was through a YouTube video, and it's this guy who basically, his goal is to take motorcycles out and ride them until they die or break. Now, I know that guy. That's Crazy Nate. He takes bikes out and rides them until they die. He puts my used motor oil back in his bikes. He rides them till the wheels fall off, the bearings no longer work. I think he's always done this. Anyways, this guy has taken a KDX 200, and I bought his little magazine. I suggest you go on Torture Test Magazine. Right now, it seems like it's just a Shopify account, and you can buy this kind of magazine where he basically took a KDX and rode it until it stopped working. And I think he ended up, I don't remember how many hours it was on, like, it was in the 200, I don't remember the amount of hours, but it's interesting. He kind of documents. He has actually oil tests done when he changes the oil kind of on his, and he's developed his own schedule on what he was going to do. Now, the reason this would never fly, like, no manufacturers are going to come to him and give him a test fleet, is because he's completely disregarding their suggested intervals for maintenance. And he has a pretty good discussion on why he decided the intervals and some of the interesting stuff he found while ignoring some of these things. And he even identified problems before they happened. He was sticking the camera down inside the bore of his KDX 200 and seeing that the electrofusion on the cylinder plating coming out. And in the end, the main bearing, the big end of the rod, finally gave out. And it was something that he wasn't exactly able to check. It's not easy to get a good picture of that thing. Maybe you could have pulled the reed block out on the KDX. I wonder if you'd be able to see it down through the reed block. But nevertheless, I mean, parts have a certain amount of life. And I don't remember exactly how many hours this bike started with. But having a lot of experience in running bikes for many, many hours, I would always stop before there was a catastrophic failure, usually because I would feel him. And it's funny because he was doing a 0 to 60 time, and the bike was getting faster and faster as it was getting older, which everybody knows it, like the two strokes. Man, they run great right before they blow up, which means all the big end is, the rod, the bearings, the main bearing, and even the small end bearing is starting to get loose. There's a lot less friction. Yeah, they run really fast, but things are starting to flex and bend, and you've got to pay attention to that. Speaking of that, I have my old 2004 or 5 KTM 200 we just pulled off apart because one of my helper kids here, Gabe, in town, was riding it, and he's trying to buy it from me. He's trying to work it off. He said it's making a little bit of a ticking noise, and originally the ticking noise was the O-rings in the exhaust pipe going out and causing a little bit of a rattle there. But as we tightened that, we put new O-rings and put new springs on it, tighten that back up, there was a different kind of a ticking noise. And yeah, it was actually on this case, after we tore it down, and we'll do a story on this, it was the small end bearing was allowing the piston to kind of flop around in there, and for sure it was causing an issue. But it was a sound that was new, and the bike was running fine, but luckily he was able to identify that and saved us probably about $500 in parts. Now it's a piston rebuild kit, so we'll go through there and fix that thing up, and we have some test parts in there. I think we have a hot rods rod in there that we rebuilt it with, and so we're going to go back and look at our notes, see how many hours we got in that thing. But it's essentially a piston kit with a new small end bearing, and throw it back together and call it all good. So I'm going to take a look at my internet feeds here again, see if we can catch up on the questions. But anyways, go check out this Torture Test Magazine. watch some of this guy's videos, see what you think. I remember when we did the torture test at Dirt Rider magazine, where it was the quote the 24-hour, and then bikes didn't break after 24 hours, so we started trying to kind of kick it up to see if there was really anything that could be learned from doing more and more testing. But these days, I mean, bikes are good. You don't, I mean, it's rare that you have a mechanical failure that wasn't caused by something that you didn't do yourself. Okay. Yeah, so Torture Test Magazine, breaking motorbikes for science and fun. I like that. So we'll see where we're at. Let's see if we go here back to live. Live. Give me some live. I can't even watch myself. I'm dropping out here. I would get pissed off too. We got to figure out a better way to do this. But anyways, if you listen to it as a YouTube video, the best thing would be to submit your questions before we go live. I'll answer them, and then you can watch it the next day at your leisure. Just start the YouTube video, put your phone in your pocket, walk around, get educated. And lastly, before we start getting going here, I know I was going to talk about the Klim tactical pant and shirt. So Klim has always kind of been into having really cool new materials and stuff in their gear. And I just got their new tactical short and pant, and it uses this stuff called, be ready for this, Poron, don't say it wrong, Poron XDR. And it's kind of like it's a foam that's actually soft. So if you like sit on it and you push on it slow, it's actually soft and cushy. But if you hit it, if it has a high speed acceleration, it actually gets kind of stiff, and evidently it disperses 90% of the energy, which is pretty impressive. Now, I haven't had a chance to test this like in actual use, other than I kind of knuckled it a few times when it was on my knee, or I knuckled it on my chest when I was playing with it, and it seems like it's doing something. So, and I'm always looking for protection that doesn't inhibit my riding. So, because sometimes I think you can be too protected enough to where you can't like operate like you're so restricted you can't do what you need to do. So I'm always looking for something like this. It seems like that's where all these kind of more technical fabrics and materials and stuff are going. So what it says is the membrane, however it works, the membrane, when it gets hit with an impact, it kind of essentially freezes momentarily, that it becomes like sort of like one piece and then disperses that energy, which is kind of neat. But it's awesome to see companies finding these new materials, companies developing these new materials and integrating them into things like helmets and gear and stuff like that. So I will let you know as we test it a little bit more. But it's like a kind of like it's like a mesh or net, kind of a net suit. It fits to your skin. It isn't like that 3DO that they have in some of the jackets that, God help me, if it gets cold in the morning and you put on your jacket and it feels like until it warms up, it's just like locked up. I haven't put this stuff in the freezer and it hasn't been freezing cold. And the one thing I really can't wait for is to get warmer out here to see if it actually allows a lot of airflow, because that could be an issue for it as well. So more product testing here at Dirt Bike Test. That's what we do. Hopefully we can answer those kind of questions as we go. And I think we're getting close. Let's see, we're almost close to an hour. And the other thing I want to talk about is something I've done before, something I'm a big fan of, is the Tour of Idaho. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, if you know what it is. Essentially, it's a single track ride, mostly single track. Well, it's single track and double track. A lot of good single track, but basically from Utah to Canada. And it was something I did a video on, did a little documentary on. It's been 3 years ago. So I guess 3 years ago. And there's a couple internet groups and stuff that are all about this. There's a Tour of Idaho group on Facebook. I think it's private. You probably can't even get on it, but you can probably do some research. And if you're really into it, you could probably beg. But you want to go to a website called motorcyclejazz.com. And there you can learn a lot about it and see if that's something you want to do. But it's supposed to be an unsupported ride, and I think it ends up being 1,600 miles. Every year is a little bit different. They change the routes, but it goes from Utah all the way up to Canada, I did it solo on a KTM 500 a few years ago. And there's a video. I'll put it up on Dirt Bike Test. I'll bump that thing up onto the slider so you can get the link to the video. And it's pretty cool to think that there's still places like that where you can ride your dirt bike 1,600 miles on really awesome trails and see, parts of the country that if you aren't committed to doing it, having the gas tank range and being able to go back here, it would take a lot of effort to drive, get unloaded, and go riding and all this other stuff. So, kind of a cool thing. Thought I'd mention that. I know I have a lot of friends that are aspiring to do it, and I tell them all the time, yeah, go ahead, but make sure you're prepared. And we have some riders rolling in. So I'm doing a school tomorrow, and I'm doing a school, and so some of my students are showing up. We put this on the forum that they play for, and I'm going to go back one more time to our questions. See what we got here. And let's see. It's funny, I was live. Let's see, I'll click on it one more time. As soon as you freeze and you start your computer, so when I start my computer, it kills it, right? Is that how this works? How else am I going to get the comments? Yeah, all the dirt bike. Yeah, so I kind of got through most of them. So it seems pretty good. I think it's all the other guys using their phones in here on the internets. But I think that's it. So again, one more time. Remember, if you miss some of the stuff, I never stop talking. I just get confused, and then I look at my computer and I have to turn it back on. So watch it on Dirt Bike Test because I'll put the YouTube feed, which is just the camera recording me, and then you can ask questions there on last week's feed. I always go on to our discuss forums, grab questions from there, and then generally before this show goes up, I ask, I say, hey, we're going to be live at 7, and then I say, hey, ask some questions there. I will get to your questions. It kind of determines what we talk about. I spent at least 13 to 27 seconds prepping for this by writing down a couple quick notes. And just here to answer your dirt bike and dirt bike product related questions. So pretty good. This is lucky number 7. It's time for my beer, and hopefully we'll see you out on the trail. Cheers.